The galaxy had already forgotten about humans. Once, long ago, humans had been strong, bold, and dangerous. Their fleets had spread across the stars. Their armies had fought against empires, pirates, and invaders. But those were old days, long buried in history. Now, humanity was weak. Their colonies had been lost. Their worlds had been destroyed in wars they could not win. What remained of humanity lived only on a few scattered planets, struggling to survive under the shadow of alien powers. And the great human fleet, the pride of their past, was nothing but rust and dust. The ships lay silent in orbital docks, covered in scars from old battles. Hulls were cracked, engines were cold, and systems were dead. For decades, the galaxy had laughed at them. Whenever alien traders passed through human space, they pointed and mocked, "Look at these ancient machines. Old trash, nothing more." Even human children looked at those ships with sadness. They were told, "This is what our people once were." But those days are gone. The governments of humanity did not have the money or power to repair the ships. The alien empires made sure of it. They placed limits, restrictions, and watchful eyes on human space. Any attempt to rebuild was quickly shut down. Humanity was not allowed to rise again. But not everyone had given up. Hidden in dark corners of human worlds, old veterans gathered. These were men and women who had once served in the fleet. Their hair was gray, their bodies scarred, but their spirits still burned. They remembered what it felt like to command a starship, to fly into battle, to fight with fire and fury. They whispered to each other in secret, "The ships are not dead. They are only sleeping." To outsiders, the old human fleet was just junk. To the veterans, they were wolves in cages, waiting to be unleashed. One of these veterans was Admiral Kalen. He had been young during the last Great War, when humanity lost half its worlds. Now he was old, but his eyes still carried steel. Every month, he visited the silent docks, walking among the dead ships. To others, he looked like a man staring at ghosts. But to him, the ship spoke. He ran his hand across the cold metal of the battleship Iron Dawn. It had fought in 20 campaigns. Its cannons had once torn through the shields of enemy cruisers. Now it sat abandoned, like a forgotten monument. Kalen whispered to it, as if the ship could hear, "Your time is not over. One day, you will rise again." He was not the only one who believed. Across human space, small groups of engineers, mechanics, and old officers secretly visited the fleet. They did not have the resources to repair it, but they studied, they planned, they dreamed. They told their children stories of the old fleet, planting seeds of hope. Meanwhile, the galaxy continued to laugh. The Zorith Empire, a reptilian race with vast armies, often joked in their councils, "If humans ever try to fight again, we will crush them in a single day." The Valari Dominion, elegant insectoid creatures, mocked humans as fragile apes clinging to dead machines. Even the smaller empires joined in the laughter. To them, humanity was finished, a broken race waiting to vanish. But the galaxy had grown arrogant. They had forgotten what humans were truly capable of. They had forgotten how dangerous desperation could be. The storm was coming, though no one saw it yet. On the colony of New Ceres, a young boy named Rylan stood with his grandfather, staring at the sky. Above them, the old ships floated like silent guardians. "Grandfather," Rylan asked, "why do we keep those ships if they cannot fly?" His grandfather, once an engineer of the fleet, smiled faintly. "Because one day, child, they will fly again. And when they do, the galaxy will remember who we are." The boy looked up with wide eyes. For the first time, he imagined those ships alive, roaring into the stars, flames bursting from their engines. The idea filled him with pride. Far away, in the deep halls of alien power, plans were being made. The great empires had grown restless. Humanity's weakness was tempting. Their small colonies were rich in resources. Their position in space was valuable for trade routes. Soon, the galaxy would no longer be content with simply mocking humans. They would come to take what little humanity had left. And when that day arrived, the forgotten fleet would no longer sleep. The ships that everyone had dismissed as useless would awaken. The admirals and captains who were thought too old would rise again. The children who grew up hearing stories would find themselves standing on the decks of steel giants. The galaxy believed the human fleet was nothing but scrap. But scrap can cut deep. Scrap can still kill. In the silence of the docks, the old ships waited. Their hulls were broken, but their cores still carried power. Their systems, though dusty, still whispered with hidden strength. All they needed was a spark, a reason to rise. Admiral Kalen stood on the command bridge of Iron Dawn. He closed his eyes and remembered the battles of his youth, the roar of cannons, the screams of enemies, the fire in his people's hearts. He opened his eyes, and for a moment he thought he saw it, the ship alive again, the screens glowing, the engines burning, the fleet standing proud against the stars. And in that vision he smiled. Because deep inside he knew. The galaxy thought humanity was finished. But humanity was only waiting. Waiting for the right moment. Waiting for the fire to return. Waiting to remind the stars what it meant to be human. And when that moment came, the galaxy would tremble. 4 years, the galaxy had mocked humanity. 4 years, the alien empires believed humans were broken, weak, and harmless. But arrogance breeds greed, and greed always leads to war. The first empire to move was the Zorath. The reptilian overlords were proud and merciless. They looked at human space and saw only weakness and opportunity. Human colonies had rare minerals, valuable gas clouds, and fertile planets. The Zorath Emperor slammed his fist on the war table and declared, "It is time to end the ape problem. We will burn their worlds, strip their colonies, and erase their name from history." The Valari Dominion quickly followed. To them, humans were insects, too small to matter. But the Valari never allowed weakness to exist near their borders. They feared that if humanity was left alone, perhaps, just perhaps, they might rise again. "Cut the weeds before they grow," hissed the Valari Queen, her voice sharp like blades. Soon, messages spread across the galaxy. Fleets were moving. Armies were preparing. The galaxy was uniting for a single purpose, to crush humanity once and for all. On Earth, the news fell like a hammer. The Human Council gathered in the underground chambers of New Geneva. The leaders looked pale, their voices heavy with fear. "They are coming," whispered Chancellor Merrick. His hands shook as he read the intercepted reports. Not one empire. Not two. The whole galaxy. The council chamber went silent. Some leaders slammed their fists in anger. Others wept quietly, knowing what was about to happen. Humanity had no fleet. Their ships were broken. Their weapons were outdated. Their defenses were weak. One governor spoke what everyone feared: "We cannot resist. We will be slaughtered." But not all were ready to surrender. A voice rose from the back of the chamber. Admiral Kalen stepped forward, his old uniform worn but proud. "No," he said firmly. "We are not dead yet. The old fleet still waits. Give me command, and I will make the galaxy bleed before they take us." The council stared at him. Some thought he was mad. Others saw the fire in his eyes and remembered the old days. But no one dared to hope. Meanwhile, far away in space, the invasion had already begun. The first wave of Zorath warships entered human territory. They moved like predators, massive black cruisers with teeth of plasma. Behind them followed Valari swarms, thousands of insectoid frigates buzzing like locusts. Smaller empires joined too, eager for spoils. Together, they looked like an ocean of steel spreading across the stars. Human colonies were the first to feel the storm. On New Ceres, alarms screamed as the sky filled with alien fire. Civilians ran through the streets while gunships rained destruction. Towers fell, fields burned, and children cried as explosions shook the ground. The local militia tried to resist, but their weapons were no match. Old rifles cracked against energy shields, and outdated tanks were melted to slag. Within hours, the colony was in flames. Rylan, the boy who once asked about the ships, hid with his grandfather in a bunker. The old man held the boy close as the walls trembled. "Grandfather," Rylan whispered, "are we going to die?" The old engineer closed his eyes. His heart ached, but his voice was steady. "Not yet, child. Not yet. The fleet will rise." The same scene repeated across human space. Colony after colony fell. Smoke rose from burning cities. Refugees fled in old transports, praying to reach Earth. The galaxy celebrated. Alien commanders laughed over their victories. One Zorath general sneered, "The apes squeal like cattle. Their end will be quick." But not everyone in the galaxy was laughing. Some remembered the old wars. Some remembered the time when humans fought like demons, when their fleets tore through enemy lines with no mercy. A few alien scholars warned, "Do not underestimate them. The humans are dangerous when cornered." But the empires ignored the warnings. They believed the humans had no ships left. They believed the old fleet was nothing but dead metal. They were wrong. On Earth, Admiral Kalen stood again in the silent docks. The massive battleship Iron Dawn floated above him, dark and cold. Around it, dozens of cruisers and destroyers drifted like empty shells. The invasion reports flashed across his console. New Ceres had fallen. Mars was under siege. Refugees begged for salvation. Kalen clenched his fists. He turned to the group of veterans and engineers gathered with him. Old soldiers, gray-haired captains, scarred mechanics. None of them young, none of them strong, but all of them ready. He spoke with a voice that cut through the silence. "The galaxy believes we are finished. They believe these ships are scrap. But I say this, the heart of humanity still beats. We will bring these ships back to life. And when we do, the galaxy will remember who we are." The veterans raised their fists and shouted in unison, "For humanity!" In the shadows of space, the forgotten fleet stirred. Engines coughed with weak sparks. Power cores flickered with light. Dust fell from old panels as systems tried to awaken after decades of silence. It was slow, fragile, and incomplete, but it was a beginning. The old wolves of steel were waking up. And as the galaxy's armies closed in, they had no idea that the prey they hunted was preparing to bare its fangs. The first invasion had begun. But the real war was about to start. The galaxy thought it had already won. Human colonies were burning, cities were in ruins, and refugees filled the stars with desperate cries for help. The alien empires celebrated, believing the last chapter of humanity was being written in fire. But in the silence of forgotten docks, the story was only beginning. Admiral Kalen stood on the command deck of the battleship Iron Dawn. The ship had been lifeless for decades. Its consoles were coated in dust, its screens were cracked, and its engines had been silent longer than most of its crew had been alive. Yet, as Kalen placed his hand on the old command chair, something stirred. Lights flickered weakly. Screens glowed with faint signals. A low hum echoed through the corridors as dormant systems began to breathe again. Around him, a handful of engineers and veterans worked tirelessly. Sparks flew as circuits were reconnected. Grease and sweat dripped as old wires were replaced. The ship groaned like a beast waking from a long sleep. "Power levels rising," reported Engineer Harlow, her voice trembling with excitement. "Not much, but enough to start." Kalen's lips tightened into a smile. "Then start it." The room shook as the engines rumbled for the first time in 40 years. The Iron Dawn shivered, then let out a deep roar as ancient power surged through its veins. Outside the docks, other ships began to awaken. One by one, the forgotten fleet lit up against the black void of space. Cruisers blinked with signal lights. Destroyers hummed with energy. Even small frigates, thought too broken to ever fly, growled with life. The galaxy had laughed at these ships. They called them junk, relics, floating coffins. But in that moment, they were wolves gathering again in the dark. Across human space, news spread like wildfire. Civilians wept with hope as they saw flashes of light from the docks. Children pointed at the sky, cheering. Refugees in broken transports turned their eyes toward Earth, whispering prayers. "The fleet is rising," they said. "The old ships are alive." For the first time in years, humanity felt something they thought was gone forever: pride. The aliens, however, were not impressed. Zorath scouts reported the awakening ships to their high command. The generals laughed. "Let them come," hissed General Vorik, his scales shining under the War Council lights. "They are flying corpses. Their hulls are weak, their weapons outdated. We will tear them apart in minutes." The Valari Dominion agreed. Their queen waved her clawed arms with disdain. A dead race holding on to dead machines. Let them fight. It will only make their destruction more entertaining. But among the younger alien officers, there was unease. They had studied human history. They remembered tales of battles where humans, even outnumbered, had fought with terrifying ferocity. They remembered the stories of human ships ramming enemy cruisers rather than surrendering. Yet their warnings were ignored. The empires were too confident, too arrogant. Back in the docks, Kalen looked at his crew. There were not many of them. Old captains, scarred soldiers, engineers with shaky hands, even a few young volunteers who had grown up hearing stories of the fleet. They were not the best soldiers in the galaxy. They were not the strongest. But they had something no alien empire understood: unbroken will. Kalen addressed them. His voice echoed through the ship's comms. Look around you. These ships were left to die. Just like us. The galaxy believes we are finished. They see only rust and dust. But they have forgotten what we are. He paused, letting the silence carry his words. We are humans. We fight when we are outnumbered. We rise when we are broken. And today, we take back our place among the stars. This fleet is not dead, it is alive. And it will remind the galaxy why they once feared us. The crew roared in response, voices filled with fire. Slowly, the Iron Dawn drifted from the dock, its engines burning brighter. The first human battleship to fly in decades cut across the void like a shadow reborn. Other ships followed, the cruiser Valiant Star, the destroyer Grey Fong, the carrier Hope's End. The forgotten fleet was no longer forgotten. Their first test came sooner than expected. A squadron of Zorath raiders appeared near the edge of the system, hunting refugee transports. They laughed when they saw the human fleet. Old trash, one pilot hissed over the comms. We will break them in minutes. But when the humans moved, the laughter stopped. The Iron Dawn opened fire, its cannons screaming with renewed fury. The first Zorath raider exploded instantly, torn apart by a storm of plasma. The other human ships moved with brutal precision, slamming into the enemy with raw, fearless tactics. The aliens tried to adapt, but they were unprepared for the madness of human combat. The Grey Fong rammed straight into a Zorath ship, sacrificing its hull just to tear the enemy apart. The refugees watched in awe as the old fleet, once silent, became a storm of fire. In less than 10 minutes, the Zorath squadron was gone. The refugees cheered, their voices echoing across comm channels. The fleet is alive. Humanity fights again. Back on Earth, the Council watched the battle reports in shock. The fleet they had dismissed as dead was now victorious. Hope, fragile but real, filled the chamber. And across the galaxy, alien commanders frowned for the first time. The humans were not supposed to fight back. The humans were not supposed to win. Yet here they were, with ships made of rust and soldiers made of scars, shattering enemies who had thought them finished. The forgotten fleet had awakened. The galaxy's armies had come to erase humanity. Instead, they had awoken the very thing they feared most. The wolves were loose again, and they were hungry. And this was only the beginning. The galaxy had underestimated humanity for the last time. The small victory against the Zorath raiders had sent shockwaves across human space. Refugees whispered with hope. Children pointed to the skies with pride. For the first time in decades, people dared to believe again. But hope was fragile. Because while a squadron of raiders could be defeated, the true test had not yet arrived. The alien empires had not even begun to show their full strength. And now, their eyes turned toward the rising human fleet with anger. The Zorath Empire was the first to answer the challenge. In their War Council chambers, General Vorak slammed his claws onto the map of human space. His voice was a hiss of fury. Enough games. The humans dare to resist us. They dare to raise their old bones against us. We will crush them, not with squads, not with raids, but with fire that will erase their entire race. The order went out. A full battle group was to be dispatched. 30 warships, armed with the latest weapons, forged for war. They were faster, stronger, and deadlier than anything humans possessed. The galaxy expected the humans to be slaughtered. On Earth, Admiral Kalen stood in the war room of the Iron Dawn. His officers gathered around the glowing star map, showing the incoming Zoreth fleet. 30 ships, Engineer Harlow whispered, her face pale. And all of them new. The young recruits exchanged nervous looks. Some whispered that they had no chance. The human fleet had only 11 ships fully active. Their weapons were decades old. Their hulls were patched with steel and hope. But Kalen's voice cut through the fear. They believe we are weak. They believe their numbers make them untouchable. But they do not understand us. They have never fought humans who refuse to bow. He leaned forward, eyes hard as steel. We will not meet them with strength. We will meet them with fury. The day of battle came. The human fleet drifted in the shadow of a dead moon, engines burning low, waiting in silence. Kalen stood on the bridge, staring at the stars where the Zoreth would appear. His crew waited with him, hearts pounding, hands trembling over controls. And then, space tore open. The Zoreth fleet arrived, 30 ships strong. Their hulls gleamed black, their weapons glowing with fire. They filled the void like a wall of death. The Zoreth general laughed as he hailed the human fleet. Old apes, you crawl from your graves. Do you think you can fight us with rust and dust? We will tear you apart and scatter your ashes. Kalen did not answer with words. Instead, he gave a single order. Fire! The first human volley lit up the void. Plasma cannons roared from the Iron Dawn. Missiles streaked from the Valiant Star. Beams of light lanced across space. The Zoreth shields held, but they did not expect the ferocity. The humans fired without hesitation, without fear, like wolves tearing into prey. The aliens responded with thunder. Bright lances of energy smashed into the gray Fong, tearing through its hull. The destroyer shuddered, alarms screaming. But instead of retreating, the captain of the gray Fong snarled into the comms. Ramming speed. The crew cheered as the ship accelerated. Flames trailed from its engines as it slammed into a Zoreth cruiser, tearing both ships apart in a burst of fire. The galaxy had forgotten. Humans would rather die as warriors than live as slaves. The battle exploded into chaos. Zoreth ships advanced in perfect formation, but the humans fought like wild beasts. They struck fast, unpredictable, reckless. They used old tactics no alien commander had ever studied, because they thought such tactics belonged to the past. The Iron Dawn unleashed a broadside that crippled a Zoreth battleship. The Hope's End launched waves of fighters, pilots screaming with rage as they tore into enemy wings. Even damaged ships kept fighting, refusing to fall silent. The aliens began to falter. For every human ship destroyed, 3 of theirs burned in return. The Zoreth general roared in fury, slamming his claws against his console. These apes should not be this strong. They should not be winning. But they were. On the refugee transport ships watching from afar, men, women, and children cried with joy. They saw their defenders not as broken relics, but as heroes reborn. Their voices filled the comms, shouting, "Fight, humans! Fight!" And the humans did. With every shot, with every sacrifice, they fought not just for survival, but for pride. Hours later, the battlefield was littered with wreckage. Human ships floated scarred and broken, but still alive. Out of 30 Zoreth warships, more than 20 were destroyed. The rest fled into the dark, their commanders humiliated. On the bridge of the Iron Dawn, silence fell as the last alien ship vanished. Then the humans erupted into cheers. Tears streamed down faces. Soldiers hugged one another. Engineers laughed through exhaustion. They had done the impossible. Admiral Kalen stood tall, his eyes wet but his voice strong. "This was the first battle," he said. "But not the last. Today, the galaxy has learned one truth. Humanity is not finished. Humanity fights." Far away, in the Zoreth capital, the Emperor's claws trembled with rage as he received the news. His fleets had been shattered by the very race he called weak. His voice thundered through the palace halls. "Call the other empires. Humanity must be destroyed completely. No mercy. No hesitation." The galaxy was preparing for total war. But now, they no longer faced a broken race. They faced humanity awakened. And humanity was ready. The first great battle had ended in shock. The human fleet, old, scarred, and outnumbered, had destroyed a Zorath battle group. Refugees cheered, children celebrated, and whispers of hope spread across the stars. For the first time in decades, humanity had stood tall. But victory came with a price. The Grey Fong was gone, its crew remembered only as heroes. Several other ships were badly damaged. Ammunition was low. Fuel was scarce. And now, the galaxy was truly awake. In the grand halls of alien empires, fury echoed. The Zorath Emperor roared, his claws tearing through the war table. 30 ships, gone to rust and ghosts. Humanity dares to defy us? They will burn for this insult. The Valerie Queen hissed with rage. We warned you to finish them quickly. Now the apes have teeth again. Very well. We will not underestimate them. We will gather every empire. We will shatter humanity once and for all. So it was decided. Not a fleet. Not a battle group. But an armada. Hundreds of ships from across the galaxy, Zorath cruisers, Valerie swarms, mercenaries from smaller empires, pirates hired with promises of spoils. They would strike together, united by greed and fear. The galaxy believed this time would be the end. On Earth, reports of the incoming armada filled the council chambers. Faces turned pale. Governors begged to surrender before all was lost. They are too many, one leader cried. We cannot fight hundreds of ships. We will be destroyed. But Admiral Kalen stood tall on the holodisplay, his uniform stained with battle smoke but his eyes sharp. They want us to believe it is hopeless. But hopeless is where humans are strongest. We have always been outnumbered. We have always fought with less. And still we endure. He pointed to the glowing map of the enemy fleet. They think numbers will save them. But numbers mean nothing against courage. We will not fight them head-on. We will strike from the shadows. We will bleed them until their armies break. His voice cut through the fear, igniting sparks of pride in every listener. The preparation began. The human fleet moved like ghosts between asteroid belts, hiding in nebulae, using dead moons as shields. Engineers worked without rest, patching hulls with scrap metal, forging ammunition from mining tools, welding broken cannons back into shape. Even civilians joined the effort. Farmers gave fuel. Children carried supplies. Refugees volunteered to crew gunships. Humanity, once scattered and broken, now stood as one. The galaxy came with fire. Humanity answered with fury. The armada arrived at the edge of Sol System like a storm of steel. Hundreds of ships stretched across the void, weapons glowing, engines roaring. The alien commanders laughed at the sight of Earth, small and fragile below them. This is the end, a Zorath general hissed. Erase them. But as the order was given, the void itself came alive. Human ships burst from hiding, striking like wolves from every shadow. The first ambush came from the asteroid field of Ceres. Dozens of human destroyers launched missiles from hidden craters, slamming into the enemy vanguard. Alien cruisers exploded before they could react. Then, from the cover of a gas cloud, the Iron Dawn appeared, cannons blazing. Its broadside tore through 2 battleships, scattering burning fragments into the void. The aliens tried to regroup, but every time they formed a line, humans struck from a new angle. Old tactics, forgotten by the galaxy, returned with brutal effect. Ships rammed. Fighters kamikazed. Human frigates latched onto enemy hulls, cutting into them like knives before detonating from the inside. The aliens fought with order. The humans fought with madness. And madness was winning. In the middle of the chaos, the Hope's End launched wave after wave of fighters. Pilots screamed with rage and laughter as they tore through enemy formations. Some never returned, but their sacrifices ripped holes in the alien lines. Admiral Kalen's voice thundered across comms. Do not fear their numbers. Every ship we destroy brings us closer to victory. Every life we give buys humanity another dawn. Fight. And they fought. The battle raged for hours, then for a day. Space burned with wreckage, lit by the fire of dying ships. The armada that was supposed to erase humanity began to fracture. The Zorath generals shouted in panic. The Valari commanders screeched in fury. Mercenaries broke ranks, unwilling to die for promises of gold. One by one, the alien ships faltered. And one by one, the humans tore them down. When the smoke finally cleared, the stars were littered with ruins. Hundreds of ships had come to destroy humanity. Now only a handful limped away in retreat, their pride shattered, their armies broken. On the battlefield, the human fleet floated battered but alive. Hulls were scarred, weapons overheated, engines failing, but they still stood. On the bridge of the Iron Dawn, Admiral Kalen looked out at the wreckage. His voice was quiet but firm. They thought us weak. They thought us broken. Today, we showed them the truth. Humanity does not break. Humanity shatters armies. His crew cheered, voices raw from exhaustion but filled with triumph. Across the galaxy, fear spread like wildfire. The humans were supposed to be extinct. Instead, they had defeated an armada. Entire empires trembled at the thought. Whispers began in alien markets and war councils. If they can rise from nothing, what will they become if we cannot stop them? The galaxy had come to crush humanity. Instead, the galaxy's armies lay shattered in the dark. And humanity was no longer fighting for survival. Humanity was fighting for its return. The galaxy had sent its might. Hundreds of ships, dozens of empires, an armada built to erase humanity. And yet, in the cold dark of space, the wreckage of that armada now floated silent. Against all odds, the forgotten human fleet had shattered the galaxy's armies. On the bridge of the Iron Dawn, Admiral Kalen stood among his crew. His uniform was torn, his face marked by burns, but his eyes burned brighter than any star. Around him, the bridge was filled with exhausted men and women, some slumped at their stations, others standing only by sheer will. They had survived. Not because of stronger weapons, not because of newer ships, but because they were human, stubborn, fierce, unyielding. Kalen spoke softly, his voice carrying across the comms to every ship, every survivor, every child listening on hidden channels across human space. Today, we did not only fight for survival. We fought for who we are. And we proved it to the galaxy. Humanity is not dead. Humanity rises. Across Earth and the scattered colonies, cheers erupted. Refugees cried in relief. Children hugged their parents, shouting the words, "We rise! We rise!" The story spread faster than light. Traders whispered it in alien markets. Soldiers repeated it in alien barracks. The humans, once thought broken, had stood against the galaxy and won. Fear spread in alien capitals. In the Zorath throne room, the Emperor raged, clawing at the walls, but his generals looked away in silence. None dared speak, because deep inside they knew, the humans were no longer prey. In the Valari Dominion, the Queen sat in her golden chamber, her mandibles clicking nervously. For the first time in centuries, her eyes betrayed fear. The smaller empires, once eager to loot human worlds, now hesitated. If the Great Armada could fall, what chance did they have? The galaxy had changed forever. But victory did not mean peace. Kalen knew the enemy would come again. Humanity's enemies would not rest until Earth was ash. Yet now, something had shifted. Humanity was no longer begging for survival. Humanity was preparing for war. The old fleet, once rusting and forgotten, was alive again. Every dockyard hummed with work. Every colony forged weapons. Engineers rebuilt ships faster than ever before, teaching young recruits the art of war. The children who once looked at broken hulls with sadness now touched them with pride. They painted names on the steel: Freedom's Flame, Steel Reborn, the Phoenix. The forgotten fleet had become the foundation of something greater. One evening, Kalen walked the quiet halls of the Iron Dawn. He paused by a viewport, looking out at the stars. The wreckage of alien ships still drifted nearby, silent reminders of the battle won. Beside him, Engineer Harlow spoke softly. "We did it, Admiral. We survived." Kalen's eyes stayed on the stars. "No. We did more than survive. We reminded the galaxy that humanity cannot be broken. And now," he let the silence hang for a moment, "now we take back what was ours." And so it began. The humans did not hide anymore. Their fleets no longer drifted as ghosts but moved with confidence. They reclaimed old colonies. They rebuilt starbases. They struck back at pirates and raiders, carving a place for themselves in the void. Every victory carried the same message: humanity has returned. The galaxy could not ignore it. Alien rulers held desperate councils. Some argued for another invasion, others whispered of peace treaties. For the first time, powerful empires hesitated to act against humans, afraid of what they might awaken if they pushed too far. Whispers spread across alien space. Stories grew into legends. They fought with rust and fire. They shattered an armada. They came back from death itself. But for the humans, it was not legend. It was truth. On Earth, children studied the battles in school. They learned about the Grey Fong's sacrifice, about the desperate ambush at Ceres, about the day the Iron Dawn roared back to life. They grew up not with shame, but with pride. Rylan, the boy from New Ceres who once asked his grandfather why the ships were kept, now stood in a military academy. He touched the patched steel of a training ship and smiled. His grandfather's words echoed in his heart. "One day, child, they will fly again. And when they do, the galaxy will remember who we are." Now, Rylan knew those words were true. In time, the fleet grew larger. The old ships were repaired, then upgraded. New ships were built, forged from human hands and human will. They were faster, sharper, and deadlier, but they carried the same spirit as the old wolves who first rose from the dust. And with every launch, the galaxy trembled a little more. Admiral Kalen, old and scarred, became a legend. To humans, he was the man who brought back the fleet. To aliens, he was the ghost who haunted their war councils. When he finally stood before his people in a great ceremony on Earth, millions gathered to hear his words. He raised his hand toward the stars and declared, "They thought we were finished. They thought our fleet was nothing but scrap. But we showed them the truth. Humanity cannot be broken. Humanity cannot be erased. Humanity will rise, and the stars themselves will remember our name." The crowd roared. Across the galaxy, the words echoed, carried by fear and awe. And so, the story of the forgotten fleet ended not in silence, but in fire. Once, the galaxy laughed at humanity. Now, the galaxy remembered. The old ships that were supposed to be scrap had shattered the greatest armies the stars had ever seen. And from that day forward, every empire, every soldier, every child across the galaxy knew one unshakable truth. Humanity had returned.